The courtroom was electric, packed with press, cameras flashing, whispers darting across wooden benches like sparks before a fire. At the center sat Judge Judy, fierce as ever in her robe, flanked by two bailiffs who looked like they hadn't blinked in years. The cameras panned dramatically to Denzel Washington, standing calm but tense at the defendant's table, his gaze sharp and unyielding. "All rise," the bailiff barked, but Denzel didn't flinch. He was already standing. Already ready. Judge Judy adjusted her glasses, peering down at him like a hawk sizing up its prey. "Mr. Washington," she began, her tone clipped and cold, "you are not here as a celebrity. You are not here as a cultural icon. You're here as a man who defied a court order. So let's drop the Hollywood." Denzel blinked, slow and steady. Then he leaned slightly forward, his voice low but razor-sharp. "And you're not here to play God behind that bench." The courtroom inhaled collectively. Reporters clutched their notepads. One camera zoomed in so fast the lens shook. "I beg your pardon." Judy snapped, leaning forward now, her gavel halfway raised. "You heard me," Denzel continued, eyes locked on her. "This system doesn't intimidate me." "You don't intimidate me." That was it. Gasps. Audible gasps. Judge Judy froze, lips slightly parted, not because she was shaken, but because she hadn't expected that tone. Not here. Not in her court. "Mr. Washington, one more word like that, and I will hold you in contempt." Denzel's lips curled into a half-smile. "You already did. When you looked at me and saw a threat instead of a man." The room fell into silence that felt carved in stone. Cameras kept rolling. Millions were already watching this unfold live. Judy's fingers tapped the bench like ticking time bombs. And everyone in that room knew, this was no longer a courtroom. This was a battlefield. Judge Judy didn't speak for a full 5 seconds, an eternity under fluorescent lights and national broadcast. She scanned Denzel like he was a math problem that refused to solve itself. Then she leaned back slowly, lacing her fingers. Her voice dropped to a calculated calm. "So you think you're above the law, Mr. Washington?" Denzel didn't blink. "No. I think I've seen what happens when the law forgets who it's supposed to serve." "You're not here to lecture," Judy snapped, her tone slicing like ice. "You're here because you refused a subpoena. Period." "That subpoena was a stunt," Denzel fired back. "You dragged me into a courtroom over a speech I gave about injustice, about the very thing this court pretends to care about." The gallery stirred, some nodding, some whispering. This wasn't just a celebrity spat anymore. This was a full-blown indictment of the system, delivered by a man who knew how to command a stage, even if it was made of oak and order. Judy's patience thinned visibly. "You're not here to play martyr either." "I'm not playing anything," Denzel said, stepping slightly forward, ignoring the bailiff's warning glance. "You want to talk law? Let's talk about the prosecutors who cherry-pick charges. The judges who smile for the cameras but frown on justice. You think a robe makes you right? You think a spotlight makes you noble?" She snapped back. That hit. Denzel's eyes narrowed. His voice dipped lower, quieter, but somehow even more intense. "No. But it makes people listen. And right now, they're listening to you pretend justice is blind while watching you aim." Boom. You could hear someone in the back whisper, "He just flipped the whole court." Judy grabbed the gavel, but she didn't slam it. Because in that moment, she knew, this wasn't just Denzel Washington in court. This was every word he'd ever said off script, on fire, in real time. And the whole country was watching. "You're walking a thin line, Mr. Washington," Judge Judy said, the warning edge in her voice sharper than steel. Denzel didn't flinch. He was in it now, too deep to retreat. "Then maybe it's time someone walked it. Because every time I speak out, the system sends someone like you to reel me back in." "Why?" She raised an eyebrow. You really think this is about silencing you? He tilted his head. Isn't it? The judge glanced to the prosecution table, then back to Denzel. You're a public figure, not a prophet. Your job is to entertain, not ignite revolutions. The room gasped. Denzel let the silence settle before answering. And yours is to uphold justice, not maintain a performance. Yet here we are, both accused of doing the other's job. That line cut deep. A clerk coughed nervously. Cameras zoomed. The stenographer paused, stunned. You're not fooling anyone, Judy said, voice quieter now, as if trying to reassert dominance through calm. This is all theater to you. That's where you're wrong, Denzel replied, voice rich with weight. This isn't theater. This is testimony. I've seen the inside of prison blocks, the fear in innocent eyes, the trembling hands of mothers who lost their sons because justice came late, or never. And what? You think you can fix that with speeches? No. I think I can shake the ones who pretend it's fixed. For a moment, Judy leaned back, silent, stewing. Her gavel hung loosely in her fingers, uncertain. Then, a slow ripple of claps emerged, from the gallery. One person. Then two. Then a wave. Judy's eyes darted toward the gallery. Order. Denzel didn't move. You want silence? Start by listening. At that second, every screen in America watching the trial went to split screen. On one side, a judge fighting for control. On the other, a man daring her to see what she'd ignored. It was no longer just a courtroom, it was a fault line. And it had cracked open, the courtroom had never been this quiet. Judge Judy's hand hovered over the gavel, unsure whether to strike it or drop it entirely. Denzel stood still, his gaze fixed, not on her, but on the dozens of lenses now capturing every breath in that chamber. I didn't come here for applause, Denzel began, his voice slow, deliberate. I came because the system kept calling me a witness to things I was never allowed to testify about. You're not on trial, Judy snapped. Denzel stepped forward. That's the point, isn't it? I never am. Because it's safer for you all if I stay a story, not a statement. The judge blinked, unsure how to respond. I've played the lawyer, the cop, the convict, the victim. I've read your scripts. I know how the justice system thinks it looks, he continued. But this room? It's not justice. It's a performance. Where truth gets rehearsed, redacted, repackaged. A murmur stirred in the gallery. You want to lecture me? Judy asked. Let me remind you, Mr. Washington, this is a legal proceeding. Denzel looked straight into the camera. Exactly. Which means everything said here becomes part of the record. And with that, he pulled a folded sheet from his pocket and unfolded it slowly, pages of testimonies from wrongly convicted youth, mostly black and Latino. He didn't read them. He just held them. I don't need to say their names. The system already forgot them. The room stilled again. Judy shifted in her seat, discomfort etched into her eyes. You may not be scared of me, Your Honor, Denzel said calmly. But you're terrified of what I represent, a man you can't dismiss, and a truth too loud to silence. Her hand finally came down with the gavel. Bang! This court is in recess. But no one moved. Because the court might have been in recess. Yet justice had just stood up. By the time court resumed, the courtroom was packed, reporters elbowing for angles, activists recording TikToks from the back row, pundits whispering into earpieces. Judge Judy re-entered not as a judge, but as a figure under public interrogation. She straightened her robe, glanced briefly at Denzel, who remained stone-faced, and then looked toward the cameras. We're not here to put the American justice system on trial, she said firmly. We're here for a specific motion. Denzel stood, but didn't approach the bench. That's where you're wrong, he said. Because every time a judge dismisses a story like mine, the system convicts itself. Mr. Washington, she warned, you're not a lawyer in this room. He raised his hand, stopping her. I don't need a degree to know what justice feels like. The gallery erupted. Judy banged her gavel. Order. But it was no use. Because outside, a video of Denzel's previous speech was now trending under the hashtag reckoning in robes. A CNN anchor whispered through the feed, what we're witnessing is not a trial, it's a turning point. Back inside, Denzel placed the folded testimonies onto the bench. No words, just paper soaked in unheard voices. You said you weren't scared, he said, voice steady. Then don't flinch now. Judy stared at the stack. For a moment, she wasn't the powerful TV judge or courtroom icon. She was a human being, faced with the crushing weight of a truth too long ignored. This court, she said softly, will take a brief adjournment. But again, no one moved. Because silence wasn't an escape anymore. It was part of the verdict. The courthouse steps had turned into a stage. Outside, thousands had gathered, holding up cardboard signs, cell phones, and silent tears. Some wore suits, others hoodies, but every eye pointed to one man inside. Denzel. Inside, Judge Judy remained seated long after adjournment. She hadn't moved since Denzel laid down the stack of testimonies, dozens of stories from people forgotten by the system. Behind closed doors, her law clerk whispered, the governor's office just called. And MSNBC is requesting a live statement. She waved the comment away. In a whisper only she could hear, she muttered, what did I miss? Meanwhile, Denzel walked through the marble hallway toward the courthouse doors. Every step echoed like a drumbeat through decades of denial. The moment he stepped outside, the crowd erupted, not in chants, not in cheers, but in quiet reverence. He raised his hand. I didn't come here to be a symbol, he began, eyes sweeping the crowd. But symbols are born when systems break down. A young black man stepped forward and shouted, we got your back, D. Denzel smiled faintly. Then someone from the crowd yelled, what now? He nodded, took a breath, and replied, now we hold the mirror up. Not just to her, but to ourselves. News anchors stammered to keep up. Hashtags flooded timelines. In boardrooms, TV studios, classrooms, and prisons, people watched. But inside, Judy finally stood. And for the first time, it wasn't to declare verdict. It was to ask herself, have I been blind? Or just comfortable? The next morning, the New York Times didn't run a quote from Judge Judy. Instead, they ran a headline. America's courtroom just heard its conscience, and it sounded like Denzel. Cable networks couldn't stop replaying the clip. On Fox News, analysts called it a staged performance. MSNBC labeled it a cultural reckoning. Twitter? It was on fire. Hashtag judge or justified. Hashtag Denzel verdict. Hashtag justice without fear. At a Senate breakfast in D.C., Kamala Harris paused her meeting to ask, did he just drag the entire bench with 3 words? And in Hollywood, producers scrambled to buy rights for something that hadn't even finished unfolding yet. But it wasn't a show. It was real. Judge Judy, still refusing interviews, sat alone in her chambers, scrolling through letters pouring in from public defenders, teachers, war veterans. One letter stopped her cold. My brother died in holding, waiting on a court date delayed for months. He wasn't a case. He was my family. And no judge ever said his name out loud, until Denzel. Across town, Denzel stood on a rooftop for a radio interview. Did you plan that moment? The host asked. He shook his head. Justice doesn't need a script. It needs a soul. The mic cut silent. The host whispered, I don't know if that was brave, or dangerous. Denzel turned, calm and razor-sharp. It's not courage if it keeps you comfortable. And with that, the airwaves didn't just carry a sound, they carried a signal. For hours, Judge Judy stared at the envelope in her hand. Inside, a formal request from the Bar Association to respond to the public backlash. Not legally binding, yet. But symbolically? It was a noose tightening. Outside her chambers, reporters gathered like wolves. Every silent hour made her look smaller. Weaker. Less in control. She stood, walked slowly to the courtroom. It was empty now. Only the echo remained. Denzel's voice had painted this room with something thicker than rhetoric. It hung in the air like smoke. Not accusation, truth. She sat at the bench. Not as a judge. As a woman trying to remember why she took this job in the first place. Was it to command? Or to listen? Her fingers touched the gavel. For once, she didn't lift it. At the same moment, Denzel stood in front of a juvenile detention center, facing cameras. No press team. No agent. Just him and a microphone. These kids aren't numbers. They're warnings, he said. Every cell filled is a silence you ignored. Every gavel slammed is a story you refused to hear. A reporter asked, "What would you say to Judge Judy right now?" Denzel didn't hesitate. Ask yourself, are you sentencing people, or escaping yourself? It wasn't a line. It was a lifeline. Judy watched from a small screen in her office. Alone. And when the clip ended, she didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just stood up, looked at her reflection in the dark glass. And whispered. He's not afraid of me, because maybe, I've been afraid of him. Not of Denzel. But of what he represented, consequence. 3 days later, a panel was called on national television. Topic: Justice, Ego, and Reform. Among the guests, a former federal prosecutor, a civil rights activist, and, most surprisingly, Denzel Washington. The host's first question was predictable. Denzel, are you trying to take down the courts? He smiled. Calm. Steady. The kind of calm that unnerves even the most prepared opponent. I'm not taking down anything, he said. I'm just refusing to pretend the system works for everyone when it clearly doesn't. Judy, watching from her home, tightened her grip on her wine glass. The activist turned to Denzel and asked, "So what do you want? Apologies? Resignations?" Denzel leaned in. No. I want the bench to stop hiding behind robes. I want accountability. I want compassion that doesn't need a headline to exist. The audience applauded. Loud. Not polite. Not staged. Loud like relief. Like someone had finally said what they were all too tired to explain. Then the host made it personal. Are you calling out Judge Judy specifically? The studio went quiet. Denzel didn't blink. I'm calling out any judge who forgets the people they sentence are still human. If she hears that, good. The clip exploded online. Within hours, hashtags flooded the trending tab. Hashtag gavels down. Hashtag Denzel for justice. Hashtag judged by the people. Judy's PR team panicked. Emails poured in. But she just sat by the screen. Watching a courtroom she no longer controlled. Because truth wasn't waiting for permission. And Denzel? He wasn't done. He was just getting started. It was a week later when the courtroom doors opened once more. But this time, it wasn't Judge Judy behind the bench. She had recused herself. Officially, it was due to public pressure and perceived bias. Unofficially, it was Denzel. Not by force, but by truth. The new judge, a young black woman in her 40s, walked in with no robe. Just a navy blazer and steel in her eyes. The room was silent, holding its breath. Denzel stood. He wasn't here to act. He wasn't here to fight. He was here to testify. As he approached the witness stand, reporters whispered, cameras flashed, and every live stream ticked up by the thousands. She looked at him, calm and composed. "Mr. Washington," she said. "Why are you here?" He paused, scanned the room, and let the moment breathe. "I'm here," he said, "because justice doesn't intimidate me anymore. I'm not afraid of courts. I'm afraid of silence." The courtroom froze. You could hear a pen drop. Then someone in the back stood up and clapped. Then another. And another. Until the courtroom was on its feet, not in protest, but in agreement. Judge Judy watched it all on screen, alone, no cameras around her. And for the first time, maybe ever, she didn't speak. Because in that moment, she wasn't the voice of justice. Denzel was. Sometimes it's not about raising your voice, it's about being the only one who dares to speak when the system expects you to stay silent. Denzel didn't just speak, he rewrote the rules. If this moment moved you, hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more untold truths. Power only shifts when we refuse to bow.